This is the school ticket. It looks like it's hard to tell like. Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? No? Ah, it had a glitch. Glitchy, glitchy, glitchy. What's that? We're ready to go? All right. You got your notes? We're looking at chapter 8, 9, and 10 tonight. A couple things we need to know before we get started. That it is hard for us to understand the concept of reading something that was actually being given in the present time of Daniel's life, and it had not come to pass yet. We, fortunately, are on the backside of that. We can see where everything came to pass. So in real time, we get to take a look at it, apply dates and times of these things taking place. Daniel's vision was totally future. Everything that he was talking about at this point in time, starting in chapter 7, he begins to speak to the future. In other words, something that had not happened yet. Now, as fascinating as that might seem, we're only going to be looking at about 7 in my pages in very large font. Only about 7 or 8 pages. We're going to read through chapters 8, 9, and 10. 2 reasons for that. One, it is almost self-explanatory if you know your history. If you don't know your history, it sounds crazy. I don't know about you, but a goat running into another goat and blowing up some horns and the horn coming out looking funny and weird stuff like that. It's just kind of weird. Well, it has everything to do with conquest, and I'll give you some information in regards to that. For instance, in the first part of chapter 8, he was talking about a place called Susa, 200 miles to the east in what we know now as Iraq. And this actually is a real place. It can be tracked. It's hard for us to imagine the fact that in the Middle East, stuff has been there for so long that it absolutely, people know what it is and where it's at, etc. In fact, I don't think I had mentioned to you, but the fact that where Babylon is, 200 miles to the east, is this place called Susa. So Daniel is transported via the Spirit, literally in the air without help of anything, to go and take a look at this thing that he is going to explain in a moment. Here we also find in chapter 8 and chapter 9, we are going to be introduced to some angels. In your King James Bible or in your several of the other different translations, they're called watchers. They're not called princes. They're not called archangels. They're called watchers. Why that is because there were watchers over every geographical area in Middle East, or what we would call the known world. Fascinating to that, in regards to that, a lot of people don't understand the concept simply because of the fact that nobody talks about the watchers, because everybody freaks out, because they don't want to talk about the giants out of chapter 11 of Genesis. And the situation, like I was talking about on Sunday, where I was talking about Caesarea Philippi, which is a big deal because Caesarea Philippi was not only the place of the underworld, or where the gates of hell actually were, or actually are. Even today, you can go to this place. And if you want to, you can Google it and you can actually see it if you wanted to take a look at it. It's just a grotto. It looks like an underground cave. And this place is a real place. And people still go to it and worship pagan images and paganness. Some even still do sacrifice. So when we're talking about these things and what Daniel was involved with, it's powerful stuff when you start thinking about this is a real thing. When I was in Ireland, I walked on I think Sherry was with us at the same time when we went to a place that had a citadel. There was a castle, if you will, and we were walking on a road that was established in 1350. I was in the 20th century. I'm walking on a road that people walked on in 1300s. I mean, come on. And not only did they walk on it, from what I understand, the Scandinavians came over in the form of Vikings and laid siege to this very building. I mean, it's bizarre. So when we talk about history, it's relevant. Nobody thinks that it's relevant when we talk about prophecy. Prophecy is relevant to the facts at hand. Daniel knew something was going to happen. Daniel was given an explanation to what was going to happen. And when it didn't happen in his lifetime, we all go, oh, he wasn't a good prophet. And then to find out that everything did happen just exactly like he said. And so we'll find that to be true when we're talking about a guy named King Cyrus. Cyrus, who took over after Alexander the Great, the great army general that did things that no one else could do, and in the form of a leopard, as we found in chapters 5 and 6, he became probably one of the most pronounced and most amazing. And in the school of war, his tactics are still taught. It's history. And they worked because no one could defeat him. He died at 35, I believe, and his generals took over the business of war, and they failed miserably. And that's when we see, we'll be talking about it tonight, the nation or the, how can I say it, the hierarchy of these guys was broken up into 4 different quadrants. Four horns? Sound familiar? So here we're going to take a look at some of this, and I think you'll find that it's very interesting in the fact that as we make the application, I'm going to come back and we're going to take a look at this by date and what was significant about those dates and why it's so easy. How many of you have heard of the Maccabees? You know who they are? Historians. There was a war. There was actually an uprising, the Maccabean uprising, in which they were caught on a mountaintop. This is history that's talked about all the way through Scripture, and especially when we go back and we take a look at some of the things that we find in the book of Enoch. And it's fascinating to understand that what you see happening is those two things being balanced. What's truth and what's not truth? It has to do with the narrative. Who's telling the story and what's the purpose of the story? And in this case, in Daniel's vision, what's the purpose of the story? To tell the people of Israel, the Jewish people, the 70 years of Jeremiah were coming to an end. Fascinating. In the 3rd year of the reign, chapter 8, verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after which it appeared to me at the first. In other words, this is the second time that this has happened. And I saw the vision, and what I saw was in Susa, the citadel, okay, we're talking about a structure, which is the province of Elam, what we know now as Iran. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, Both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. Again, this is power. Ram, goat, that type of thing. It's talking about a kingdom. And as I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. In other words, he came so speedily, his feet didn't even hit ground. He was like floating in air, supercharged, without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came to the ram with the two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and the ram ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and as he engaged against him, he struck the ram and broke two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, and they cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat came exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Remember what I'm talking about? All of a sudden, now this kingdom has been broken in 4 pieces. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards a glorious land. Glorious land would be what? Jerusalem. It grew great, and even the host of heaven, even to the host of heaven. And some of the hosts came of the stars, threw it down to the ground, and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of the sanctuary was overthrown. What do you think they're talking about here? Temple. Think about it, temple. And the host was given over to altogether with the regular burnt offering because of the transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, holy one being one of the who? Watchers. People, we're talking not people, we're talking deity, we're talking about somebody supernatural. Holy one who spoke, for how long is this vision concerning the regular burnt offering and transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said for me, 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored to its rightful state. Interesting. There's a number here. Does it have significance? Absolutely. We'll look at it when we go to our notes. Verse 15, and when I, Daniel, see the vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. I heard the man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. Duh. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that this vision is for the time of the end. Of the end. What do you think that means? End of what? Everything. And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand up. And he said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be in the latter end of the indignation, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw with the 2 horns, these are the kings of what? Media and Persia. In other words, this is the Asian side. The goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. For the horn that was broken, in place of the 4 others arose. 4 kingdoms shall arise, his nation, but not with his power. And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power. He shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. You see what's going on here? Follow now. By his cunning he will make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and shall be broken, but not by human hand. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. Chapter 9. Daniel's prayer for his people. This is a fascinating prayer because he's talking about identifying himself with the people of God, taking on the burden. This is what happens when you intercede in prayer. Verse 9, chapter 9, verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, by descent of a Mede, who made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books in the number of the years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. He's referring to the prophecy of the people of God being released from Babylonian, whoever happens to be in charge at that point in time, releasing them back into Jerusalem. Then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and plead for mercy, for fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed that the Lord my God made confession, saying, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, we have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. He's praying for the people of God. We have not listened to your servant and the prophets who spoke in your name, and our kings and our princes and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as it is today the men of Judah, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and all of Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, in all the lands which you have driven them because of the treachery that they have committed against you. To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by walking in his laws, which is set before us by the servants and the prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. And the curse and the oath that are written in the law of Moses and the servant of God have been poured out upon us because we have sinned against him. He has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us, against our rulers who ruled us, by bringing upon us a great calamity. I think it would be. You've been in captivity for a long time. And for under the whole heavens there has not been done anything like what has been done against Jerusalem. As it is written, the law of Moses and all this calamity has come upon us, yet we have not entreated the favor of the Lord God, turning from our iniquities and gaining insight in your truth. Therefore the Lord has kept ready the calamity and has brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all his works that he has done. We have not obeyed his voice. And now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with his mighty hand, have made a name for yourself. And on this day we have sinned and we have done wickedly. He's taken it all on himself. I mean, think about this. He's interceding for the people. O Lord, according to all your righteous acts, let your anger and your wrath turn away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy city, because of our sin, for the iniquities of our fathers. Jerusalem and your people have become a byword among all who are around us. Now, therefore, O our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas for mercy. And for your own sake, O Lord, make your face to shine upon your sanctuary, which is desolate. Very important term that he just used there, desolate. Remember, that you hear that a lot. In the prophetic realm, everybody wants to talk about the thing that's going to be desolate. That's going to be the sign of the end. No, it has everything to do with right then. Oh my God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolation. See the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake. Well, could we not be praying that right now? For my God, because your city and your people are called by your name. Look what happens next. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord my God in the holy hill of my God, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. He made me understand, speaking with me, saying, O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out, and I have come to tell you that you're greatly loved. You've been praying, you've been interceding. I heard you. God has heard you. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. 70 weeks are for the decree about your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both the vision and the prophet, and to anoint the most holy place. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, who do you think we're talking about here? This is Jesus. There shall be 7 weeks. For the 62 weeks there shall be built again with squares and a moat in a troubled time. A guy named Nehemiah. Think about that. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off, it shall have nothing, and the people and the prince who is come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be a war. Desolations are decreed. And they shall make strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for 1/2 of a week they shall be put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decree end is poured out on the desolator. Daniel's terrifying vision of the man in chapter 10, verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belshazzar. And the word was true, and it was great conflict. And he understood the word and had understand of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 weeks, 21 days. I ate no delicacies, meat or wine entered my mouth. I did not anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the 1st month, when I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, we know where that's at, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold of Uphaz upon his waist. His body was like beryl. His face was the appearance of lightning, as light flaming torches. His arms and legs were agleam like burnished bronze, and the sound of his words were like the sound of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with him did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves, as would I. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance had fully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of the words, and I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling upon my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved. Wouldn't you want to hear that? Understand the words that I'm going to speak to you, and to stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when I had spoken the word to me, I stood up trembling. And then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, from whom the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words had been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. This is telling us that geographically there are entities over communities, just like there's an entity over our community. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to me in help, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. And he came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision is for the days yet to come. When I had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute. And behold, one of the likeness of the children of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, and he came to me and stood before me. He said, O my Lord, by reason of the vision pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me, no breath is in me. Again, one having the appearance of man came to me and strengthened me. And he said, O man, greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage. For as spoken to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you that what is inscribed in the book of truth, there is none who contends by my side except Michael, your prince. He has somebody that's assigned to him. This is something that's going on. So we're going to stop there because I want to go to chapter 8 and look at the notes that go with that. Any questions about what you've heard so far? Or are you just totally blown away? Well, I mean, seriously. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is pretty amazing. There's a bunch of historic events that are taking place as we are listening, and we need to understand what's going on. So, first of all, at this point, the text in chapter 8 reverts from Aramaic to Hebrew. In other words, what happens, it is being recorded in Aramaic up until chapter 7. Chapter 8 changes to Hebrew. Gee, I wonder if there's any significance in that. I think it is, because who's he talking to? The people of God. Okay, so that changes. The second vision focuses on the second and third empires, spoken about in chapters 2 and in chapter 7, the Persian and Greek empires. Susa, one of the 4 capitals of Persia, was east of Babylon, about, like I said, 200 miles. The Persian Empire, represented in chapter 7, verse 5, as a devouring bear, is now presented as a 2-horned ram in verses 3 and 4 of chapter 8, is being a coalition of the Medes and the Persians. In other words, they had a war, they kind of came together, and now they're another obstacle, if you will, another giant in the realm. The Greek Empire, pictured in chapter 7, verse 6, as a 4-headed leopard. Remember, the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, coming from Greece, is what we're talking about, is now portrayed as a swift he-goat bounding furiously from the west, having one great horn, which, when broken, was replaced by 4 horns, or it became 4 different kingdoms. Because Alexander the Great died at a very young age. Very strange. Nobody really knows why, or if he was murdered, or what the case may be. Probably was murdered, I'm saying. So Alexander the Great, who broke the Persian Empire in 331 BC, was the Great Horn. Now, the prophecy was written in 539 BC, 200 years before its fulfillment. In other words, he predicted this was going to happen 200 years before it happened. Was he around then? No. But we know through history that this took place. It's the most remarkable prediction of a war and its outcome between 2 world empires, which at the time of the prediction didn't even exist. That's pretty wild. Think about it. The 4 horns are the kingdoms to which Alexander's empire was divided. Chapter 7, verse 6, chapter 8, verse 22. There will be more details about that in chapter 11 when we get to that, our next chapter next week. The little horn in this chapter refers to Antiochus IV, who ruled Syria from 175 to 164 BC and made the determined effort to stamp out the Jewish religion. We'll find more about that in chapter 11 of Daniel. This guy was bad news. In 167 BC, Antiochus desecrated the temple, just exactly as Daniel predicted. Verse 13, by installing a pagan altar for sacrifices. That's what they call desolation. In other words, offering things within the temple that are not godly. Verse 14 refers to 2,300 evenings and mornings. Antiochus first meddled in Jewish affairs in 171 BC and died in 164 BC. Approximately, look at this, 2,300 days later. Verses 9 through 14 in chapter 11 will vividly depict the atrocities of his reign, which resulted in the Jewish Maccabean revolt. In First Maccabees, if you have that book, I have a set of those, Maccabees, First Maccabees 1 through 6, recounts this period in Jewish history in great detail. In other words, what Daniel prophesied, they confirm. The word prince used in verses 11 and 25 refers to God himself. In attempting to wipe out the Jewish religion, Antiochus was directly challenging the God of Israel. In verse 16, I think that's probably why 2,300 days he was dead, just saying. That was first mentioned in the Bible in God's messenger angel, Gabriel. This is the first time that he's ever mentioned in Scripture. It was Gabriel who appeared to Zechariah, father of John the Baptist, and again to Mary before the birth of Jesus. This is very interesting. The repeated phrase, time of the end, usually refers to winding up of history, in verses 17 and 19 of chapter 8, and God's final judgment. But it may also mean that along with the new view of Antiochus, there may have been in the distant background of the vision of an ominous outline of a far more terrible destroyer in verse 26, to mar the closing days of history, in whom Antiochus was symbolic forerunner. This is something that we need to understand. Now we're going to chapter 9. This is where it gets a little more interesting, especially when we get down to what was said in Ezra in regards to the proclamation of Cyrus. Now the date is 538 BC. Babylon has virtually ruled Judah since the Battle of Carchemish in 605. In other words, they've been incarcerated for a very long time, approximately 70 years. And what did Daniel say? You would be freed, Jeremiah said, in 70 years they'd be set free. How could this happen? We've only got 3 years left. How's that going to work? 70 years of captivity spoken by Jeremiah now is almost up. Daniel pleads with God for the return of his people to their homeland in verses 4 through 19 of chapter 9. Daniel is completely one with his people, sharing the blame for sin, verse 5, and his request relies solely on God's mercy, verse 18. Daniel saw the answers to his prayer that same year, but Israel's troubles weren't even over yet. The beginning of the Jews' restoration and deliverance from exile was decreed by Cyrus, king of the new Medo-Persian Empire. Remember, we're talking about another group. All these little horns that sound so weird, and he-goats and goats and rams and all that stuff. It's all about kingdoms rising and falling. Why did God use these interesting depictions pictorially? It's kind of like, I read a thing the other day. I said it'd be like going to Alaska, finding an Eskimo, and try to explain to him what a pineapple was. Think about it. Ain't gonna happen. They have no clue. Now, if you say whale blubber kind of tastes like, like chicken, I'm just saying, it probably would not work. So he was using things that everyone would understand. The question is that in doing that, it confuses the issue with most people because we are not, or we've never lived in that time frame. And I'm sorry, it's mind-boggling as I showed you Babylon, and to think that there were gardens 360 feet off the ground that were 120 yards in square, and they were pumping water from the Euphrates up to the thing, and all of that's going on in 605 BC. Come on. We can't do that. That can't be done. They did it. So there's things that we just don't understand. So here it happens in Ezra 1 through 4. This is out of the ESV. This is the proclamation from Cyrus, king of the Medo-Persian Empire. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, the word of the Lord by the truth of the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. Isn't it funny how he uses a bunch of people that are not believers? That just cracks me up. And everybody says, oh, God can't do anything. Yes, he can. Let me tell you. Then he made a proclamation throughout his kingdom and put it into writing. And when you put it into writing, that means it's going to come to pass. Thus says King Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all of the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you and all of his people, may his God be with him, and let him go to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. Sunday I made a point that I think it bears saying again. When you look at wilderness and where God lived, when you walked outside of Jerusalem, there was no God, at least not the God of the Bible. People believed that once you left Jerusalem, God did not follow you anywhere. Serious. Look it up. David says it. David said it when he was being chased by Saul. Don't let me go into this place because God is not there. Let me stay here in Jerusalem. And it's fascinating that was what people believed. Now, it's kind of interesting because what does Cyrus go on to say? He is God who is in Jerusalem. Let each survivor in whatever place he sojourns be assisted by the men of his place with silver and gold. He's given them the bank and the goods, and with beasts besides free will offering for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. Don't you wish? I mean, this is amazing. I'm sorry, this is just amazing. Ezra 2, verse 64, it says this. The whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom were 7,337. And they had 200 male and female singers. Their horses were 736, their mules were 245, their camels were 435, and their donkeys were 6,720. Wow. These guys were in captivity, they were slaves, and now all of a sudden, they're in the top 500 of Wall Street. I'm just saying. The captivity which is drawing to a close had lasted 70 years, but Daniel did not go with his people back to Jerusalem. He remained where he was. After another 3 years, Daniel received from the angel Gabriel the vision of the 70 weeks. Daniel was told by the angel that there would be yet another 70 weeks until the coming of the Messiah. Verse 24. The 70 weeks is generally understood to mean 70 weeks or years, or 70 years. That is 70 sevens of years, and 7 times 70 years, which equals 490 years. It is as the angel was saying, captivity has been 70. Now the period between captivity and the coming of the Messiah will be 7 times that long, 490 years. The actual facts of this prophecy are incredibly amazing. 7 and cycles of 7 sometimes have symbolic meanings. For the Jews, the number 7 itself symbolizes completeness or perfection. From the date from which the 70 weeks was to be counted was the decree to rebuild Jerusalem at verse 25. There were 3 decrees issued by Persian kings for this purpose: 536 BC, 457 BC, and 444 BC. And you can look at the book of Ezra for more info. The principal decree was 457 BC. The 70 weeks subdivided into 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 week in 25 and 27. It is difficult to see the application of the 7 weeks, but the 69 weeks, including the 7th, equal 483 days. That is, using the year-to-day theory, which we've all talked about. Remember, always use the same application. Don't change it. If it doesn't fit your narrative, you're probably wrong. Remember that. So now, for 40 days, I assign you a day for each year in Ezekiel 4:6. This 483 years is the period between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the coming of the Anointed One. who's the anointed one, journeying to the cross, Jesus. The decree to rebuild Jerusalem was in 457 BC. Adding 483 to 457 brings us to AD 26, the very year Jesus was baptized and began his public ministry. And how could that be? Daniel wasn't around. He talked about this long before he ever had. Now, the most remarkable fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy to the very year. In verse 24, the angel gives Daniel 6 things that remain to be completed. Here they are: to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, seal both the vision and the prophet, and to anoint of the most holy place. Within 3.5 years, Jesus was crucified. In the midst of 1 week, the anointed one was cut off. He shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. That's verses 24, 26, and 27. Did that not happen? When Jesus died, you don't have to give a sacrifice anymore if he was the perfect sacrifice, right? Now, so it seems that God, in veiled form, was showing Daniel things that anticipated the person and the work of Jesus Christ. It is Jesus' work on the cross that finishes the transgression and puts an end to all of our sin. In other words, once and for all, sin has been bought and paid for. Done. Now it goes on. It is his work that in the end will vindicate both the visions and the prophet. It is his bloodshed that anoints the most holy place, just as the priests used the blood of sacrifice in the most holy place in the temple, securing eternal redemption for his people, Hebrews chapter 9, verses 11 and 12. Daniel foretold not only the time which the Messiah would appear, but also the duration of his public ministry and his atoning death for human sin. Now, note, some people think that God's chronology was suspended at the death of Christ. In other words, that was the end of the 69 weeks, 70th week didn't start. Well, that's a problem. While Israel was scattered and the last half of the 1 week belongs to the time of the end. Well, here's the problem. Summary of Daniel's prophecies. We'll take a look at that real quick, and then we're going to jump into chapter 10 as we wrap this up. Chapter 2, the 4 kingdoms and then God's everlasting kingdom. Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's insanity and recovery. Walking around eating grass like a cow. Kind of weird. It happens, though. I read about it. I couldn't believe there's other people that have the same problem. Chapter 5, the fall of Babylon, the rise of the Persian Empire. Chapter 7, the 4th empire, the 10 horns and other horns. Chapter 8, Greek Empire, its 4 horns. Chapter 9, 70 weeks, the time from Daniel to the Messiah. And then, of course, chapter 11 and 12, we will be talking about in the days to come, and next week in particular. So chapter 10, angels of the nations. This is huge. The last 3 chapters of Daniel are divided like this, chapter 10, 11, and 12. Chapter 10, when and how the vision came. Chapter 11, the content of the vision, which we'll talk about next week, and how the final vision concluded. In other words, what's it going to look like? The last vision comes to Daniel after a long fast. His prayer is recorded in chapter 9, and his effectiveness, and God lifted the veil, showing Daniel some realities of the unseen world. Conflicts going on between supernatural intelligences in the spiritual realm, good and bad. In an effort to control the movements of nations, some of them seeking to protect God's people, others wishing to destroy God's people. Michael, the guardian angel of Israel, chapter 12, verse 1. An unnamed angel who talks with Daniel. Did you notice that? He is not mentioned. His name is not set. We know that he's there, though. He's having a conversation with Daniel. It seems that God was showing Daniel some of the secrets, agencies in operation to bring about the return of Israel. One of them helped Darius, chapter 11, verse 1. In this chapter, we'll represent as being interested in the destiny of Israel in Revelation and the destiny of the church. In Revelations chapter 12, verse 7 through 9, Michael and his angels are at war with Satan and his angels. We read this of chapter 12, verse 7. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. Who's the dragon? And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. In other words, you have rebelled, you are sinful, you cannot be here. You're out. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels thrown down with him. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, powers of the unseen world are the chief enemies in which Christians have to fight. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. There was a great angelic activity when Jesus was born. In Matthew 4, verse 11, it is stated that Jesus was ministered to by angels. The princes in this chapter are the angelic beings of those various nations. That is what I want you to be privy to. You need to understand that those angels that we're talking about, those principalities and powers, are real deal. And a lot of people don't believe that anymore. But when Jesus goes in front of the gates of hell, stands on a rock and says, I am going to build my church right here. And he then turns and points to the gates of hell, and he says, and they're not going to be able to do anything about it. This is the key to what we understand as having keys to the kingdom, the place in which we are struggling. So many of us struggle with so much stuff, I'm telling you, and we think that it's just life. But there are principalities and powers, there are things out there that do not want you to succeed. And you know that when they have a mind to it, they show up and they do stuff to keep us from moving forward. This is when you need to be aware and allow God's Holy Spirit to teach you the difference between knowing the difference and seeing and letting your gifts operate so that you can see what's actually going on. A lot of people don't understand it. I believe that depression, I believe that that feeling of how can I say, heaviness, spoke about in Proverbs, spoke about in Psalms, that spirit of heaviness is not something that comes from you, it comes from darkness. And when that comes into a person's life and it surrounds them, it creates an atmosphere in which they suffocate from the presence of darkness. But my God tells me, the God of heaven tells me, that there shall be nothing that will harm you. When you call upon my name, I am there. And if I am there, then I am everywhere. So he goes before us, and he goes from behind us, and he keeps us safe in every way, shape, or form when you call on his name. But when you ignore him, do your own thing, and think that you're going to get away with it, just read about what happened to Israel. Every time they started following false gods, God said, okay, fine, my hand's off. Boom, captivity, boom, war, boom, this, calamity. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying this is that it's better to be in his presence than to be out of his presence. Who said it better? David, wasn't it? He said, if I could be just a doorman in the house of the Lord. Greetings. That's the difference. Just to be part of the family. Let me do that. Let me be that. And I believe that's what God says. He says, just do it. And you will never, ever be sorry. So, questions, thoughts? Have I confused you? Do you care? Say again? Making sense now.